We have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
Hello and welcome to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast. This is episode 124, and joining me today, my co-host. Well, ever since Will Smith slapped, he's been hurting for work, so we've got Hancock joining me today to talk about one of the greatest analysts, one of the analytic minds out there right now on today's show, the swami of Konami, the connoisseur of context, the wizard of the worksheet. He's more than just a guy on a couch. He's a fantasy meteorologist over at Sharp Football, a FSWA award winner. Please welcome the Lord of all things fantasy, the one and only Rich Hribar. How you doing?
I like it. The air horns there. I love when you bring those in. You know, this is cool, man. It's I'm glad to hang out. I got a chance to meet Matt in Canton, and talk a little bit with him. So I'm glad we get a chance to chop it up here.
Yeah, that Canton trip, that's coming up already. I've already got the hotel booked, mostly because, like Stefan Diggs, I love the cookies at the DoubleTree, so I made sure to book that hotel room right now so I can get those DoubleTree cookies. The flight is booked. I'm bringing the wife because she apparently wants to come see what us nerds all do when we get in Canton, so that's going to be fun for her.
So bored. She's going to be so bored.
Yeah, there's nothing to do in Canton.
Nope, but she doesn't know that yet, so it's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to this all together.
Like I told you so.
Well, the best part is when we get together, we do that the Kings Classic draft there, and I don't know what she's going to do during that draft. That's where it's going to be really interesting for her. So, she can walk around the Hall of Fame there a few times and see what's going on. But, hey, we're not here to talk about the Kings Classic, although that is coming up close. Shout out Bob Long. We're here to talk about the Lord of the Reeves. Lord Reeves himself here. We'll get into the behind the grind here in just a second. But as always, hey, as the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast is presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group, contractually obligated football talk here right now. And we need to talk some early wide receiver tiers for 2022 and how this wide receiver class fits into that here now, Rich. Now, I know you just released a little bit of your wide receiver tiers here not too long ago over on Sharp Football, I believe it was. How does this class stack up with those tiers right now?
Well, this class in general is pretty interesting, and especially what we've seen happen so far through the offseason of the NFL and how the wide receiver position is getting handled. It's not just when the guys like Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, and Stephon Diggs all get paid top dollar at the position. It's when, guys like Christian Kirk are getting, $17, $18 million, and none of the other positions, the market is really moving. I mean, you see like Christian Kirk get more on the market than a JC Jackson or a Carlton Davis. So teams are now have to be factoring into some cognizance here of everyone. You can never just have enough wide receivers right now, especially on rookie contracts, just because of the money that you're going to have to pay. I mean, the Bengals here are a couple years away, but they're going to have Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase all come up for contracts in a 2-year span, and it's going to be brutal. The dilemma of drafting well, right? Like they're going to get punished for drafting well. I think we're going to see that teams are going to be aggressive with wide receivers in this draft class, particularly at the back end of that first round too. And those teams might be frozen out if there's a big run early, just because of the amount of wide receivers that are needed on the football field now. Average run 3-4 wide receivers, and then the contractual leverage you get by having a good wide receiver on a rookie contract now, compared to other positions in context of the market. I do think that we're going to see a lot of aggressiveness with the wide receiver class.
I think you can see a lot of those teams at the top of the first round the top of the second round trading back into the first to get that fifth-year option on a lot of these wide receivers, like you said, to try and keep them. Like these teams that are having the most success right now in the NFL are those teams with the quarterbacks on those cheap rookie contracts right now, and then building around it. And you're seeing teams having to choose between quarterback and wide receiver: Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Rodgers, essentially, and Devontae Adams. So you have to if you've got a good young quarterback, you need to make sure you got that good young wide receiver coming up, and make sure your quarterback gets paid, because there might not be enough money when it's all said and done here in the next 4 years when those contracts come due.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're seeing that's the difference between these guys that have been traded, right? Is that they're not attached to rookie quarterbacks, and that's kind of you have that luxury of having a quarterback on a rookie contract. You can pay the the $25-30 million contracts out and kind of go that route, but it gets tough when you also have the quarterback on the 30 to 40 million as well.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of these quarterbacks that these duos there, the Rodgers, Adams, the Hill, Mahomes. The only one that's kind of still together is Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. And we know they went out there, and it's weird. When you need money, you find a way to get that money, much like the Los Angeles Rams have done for the last few years. I mean, they don't believe in no stinking cap. They don't even believe in draft picks, and yet they're still able to put something together when it's all said and done. So when you're looking at this wide receiver class, or even the draft in general, who are some of your guys to be looking at here?
Well, I mean, we've been talking about these guys basically since the kind of the end of the year. So everyone's kind of already, like you said, we joked a little bit before we even came live, but we're in the nitpicking stage now over the final month where we're kind of dissecting, kind of the pessimism of over all these guys. So I won't talk about any of the guys that like we've really kind of like inundated ourselves with at the top that you're going to need like a top 5 rookie pick, but some guys that like I really am kind of just monitoring where come April that I would like to see get higher draft capital than maybe is expected. I mean, following suit with a lot of people, I think Damien Pierce from Florida is a guy that looks really intriguing. The underlying metrics on him just look so good. I mean, he was just with a donkey head coach. We saw this happen with like Alvin Kamara in Tennessee, right? Like where you have this like elite player, and every time he touches the football, it looks amazing. Because I'm sure you just go watch any of Damien Pierce's carries, like they're incredible. But he was second in this draft class in runs to gain a first down or touchdown at 37%. He forced a missed tackle once every 2.5 carries. That's first in this class. He averaged 3.7 yards after contact per carry. That was 12th in this class. He was 11th in amount of runs that went for 15 or more yards. He also is a good receiver. I mean, he's third in this class in yards per route run. So I think that he offers a lot of 3-down ability for a guy that was just kind of mismanaged at Florida. The running back class, we're kind of just looking for draft capital. I think Keontae Ingram's pretty interesting at USC. He's also a guy that he can go in like round 4 or just not be drafted, but he's another one of those guys that's like 220 pounds, caught the football a ton. He transferred from Texas just because he wasn't going to play over Bijan Robinson. But all those underlying metrics for him look really good as well. Guy that can catch the football. 10% of his carries went for 15 or more yards. That's 5th in this class. Of all running backs since 2000 that are 220 pounds or more, he's 6th in career collegiate receptions. So we always like when our big guys can catch the rock. We don't want them coming off the field. Then at the receiver position, I'm still interested to see where Jalen Tolbert goes from South Alabama. When you look at Jalen Tolbert at South Alabama, when you look at the South Alabama offense, they averaged 5.9 yards per target targeting any player that wasn't Jalen Tolbert, and then 10.9 yards per target targeting him. That's just the cesspool of an offense that he was like forced to play in and was still really good. Number 1 in this class in percentage of team yards, yards from scrimmage, 7th in share of team receptions and receiving touchdowns. So I'm looking at kind of those guys, and they're kind of like my fringe guys that like you're kind of rooting for. We're not going to go in round 1. They're probably not going to go in round 2. We would like to see them sneak in there, but I'm kind of keeping an eye on those guys to see if they go with just a little more capital than expected.
I am so glad you mentioned Jalen Tolbert. I've been tooting his horn since the start of the season. Last year, he put up some big numbers towards the end of the year. Got me really hyped this year. And then he kind of went under the radar. No one was talking about him. Now we're getting back to draft season. There's a little bit of talk here. So he's definitely one of my guys as well. I absolutely love everything that he does. You can talk about a guy 6'1", 195, give or take. If you look at RAS score, if you're into that relative athletic scoring, 8.59 while running a 4.49 40. I mean, he's got some wheels. That's 4.5 is good enough for a wide receiver, right? And you throw that athletic scoring in there. I mean, he's definitely an intriguing prospect. I'm hoping that can come in here on Sundays and absolutely ball out. But outside of that top 6, maybe 7 wide receivers that could all go in the first round, it gets really muddy after that. And we don't that 6 through 13 or 7 through 14 range. Those guys are interchangeable depending on what your flavor of the week happens to be.
Still a lot of good talent, though.
I would say this. Everyone talks about the wide receiver class, this class in general. I wouldn't say it's a great class, but I would say it's a very good class all the way through.
Yeah. So
yeah, like we said in the open, the opportunity is going to be there for these guys. I mean, every team is basically running 11 personnel as base now offensively. So I mean, you need to run deep at wide receivers, and you're just seeing more opportunities for rookie wide receivers than we did. Where we used to do the old mantra, back in the day of like by the time they break out by their third year, you're seeing guys now produce years 1 and 2, and if you're not producing by years 1 and 2, we're almost off the boat now.
True.
Well, we always make that joke, that fourth-year breakout, that Corey Davis breakout in the fourth season. You know what I mean? And if you're not breaking out in that first 2 seasons, like you just said, we're starting to worry about you. And hey, it's what have you done for me lately type league. And in fantasy, I mean, I think we've been spoiled. I mean, I don't think we have the patience as far as fantasy managers right now to wait 2 or 3 years for a player to develop. I mean,
That's just us in general. That's not just fantasy football. That's humanity.
I basically take the same attitude my kids have around the house, right?
Yeah.
Right now. And speaking of right now, we are about to go behind the grind with Rich Hribar here. And we're going to ask you some questions here to kind of give an intimate look of your fantasy career coming through all the way from day one to right now and everything in between. But first, before we get into that, this is one of the most important questions we have on the entire show. Kind of sets the mood moving forward. If you were coming in the bottom of the 9th inning, or you were coming down to the wrestling ring, or heck, you wanted to be introduced at the Fantasy Football Expo, what is that music that's going to introduce you to all the people out there?
I would go with Stan Bush. You Got the Touch. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one.
You got the touch.
Yeah, it was the Transformers from the 80s.
Yeah.
Transformers movie. It's also the song that Mark Wahlberg cuts in Boogie Nights when he puts out the record.
Yes.
So I would come out with that. Yeah, you got the touch. Pew, pew, pew. Yeah. You got the power.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, that's probably one of the best ones I've heard so far.
Well, no, Major, we got to go with that. So you got that song coming up there. But when you're sitting in the back room, what's that guilty pleasure song you're listening to? Is there like a Shakira going down? Is there maybe a little Britney Spears to get you kind of hyped up? Like, what's that song on your iPod that you're like, I probably shouldn't admit it, but I kind of really enjoy it?
Is this for Major or me?
No, that's for you.
For me. Admittedly, so I mean, my middle child I have a 9-year-old daughter, so we do listen to a lot of music. So I found that Olivia Rodrigo slaps pretty good right now. So I can get
like
down
he
to
said
Olivia
slaps.
Rodrigo now. Yeah.
I think that no one's ever said that sentence ever.
It could be worse because I use the terms lit and turned up on the show every once in a while.
And he uses it wrong every single time. But let's move on, man. Like, did you play any sports as a youth, and how did it develop you to the person you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up playing, sports. I was more of a baseball player, then got into football later, into high school and stuff, and then held on through my adulthood of the weekend warrior phase into my mid-30s, doing softball and still flag football. We used to travel universally, and we're like universally ranked in flag football. Nice. Got to travel to like nationals for Florida and do that for like 6 or 7, 8 years. We had a friend break his neck. And that was kind of like the warning call for all of us to be like, shit, man, I gotta go to work Monday. Like,
right.
I can't tell my work like, oh, I broke my ribs playing football. Like, at age 35. But yeah, he is putting a halo. Everything's good now. He's doing good. But that was kind of like the warning bell to all of us. It's like, well, it's time to stop chasing the ghosts, I guess. So now I just kind of live vicariously through my kids playing. My oldest is in high school and he's playing baseball right now. Even though I'm in Ohio and the weather's just been terrible so far to start the year, but they're still grinding it out and playing these 40-degree baseball games.
Man, who are some of your favorite players growing up? Like your favorite team's player, can be any sport.
I picture Jerry Rice behind me. He was the first guy that kind of set me off. He was like football Jesus. Like he was the kind of the guy that's like, oh yeah, I like the sport because of him.
Right.
It's a bummer because like adulthood Jerry Rice, like, isn't that cool? But like he was great growing up, and obviously he's such a good player. Like it's easy to fall in love with a player like that. I used to love Fred McGriff, the crime dog. He was in the Tom Amansky videos, at the hat, the guys throwing the baseballs into the garbage cans. I used to love the crime dog, and pre-steroids Barry Bonds and his pirate Barry Bonds. Because I used to love Jim Leland too. They just used to burn those heaters on the bench. Those are the guys that I always kind of loved as a kid.
Do you have a favorite Hartford yard goat or whatever they are?
No, literally, it's just a cool minor league hat that literally I usually, if you always see me, I always usually have a block C, the for Cleveland hat. But this particular sweater, there's no block C hat that matches it. So we've got a Hartford.
Matt, how the hell did you even know that? Like, how did you know that?
Useless information, Major. Plus, Twitter and Google stalking is fantastic.
I will say minor league baseball hats are where it's at for like really sweet
true.
logos. Like
True.
I've got a couple of them in the collection because they do like weird like promos and stuff, and they'll wear a hat like one time, and there's some real like gems you can find out there.
Nice.
Well, our buddy there, Calvin there, he's got like what's it in Louisiana, the baby cakes or something, that big baby doll. Yeah. I mean,
king
not
cakes,
only
right?
baseball.
Is it king cake? I don't know what the team's called, but it's the king cakes are what's popular, right?
Yeah. It's a creepy mascot though. Let's be honest.
You find the baby, is it like it's like you find the baby in the cake, like it's random, like whatever the plastic baby doll is in the cake. I don't know what the hell it is, but
So I also need to know this right now because when I look through Twitter and stuff, I check out all the Abbeys and try and put a face to a name, so to speak. I got to know about the Lord Reeves, their Twitter handle there, and why is the Lord of Bayside, Zach Morris, representing you?
I actually tried to change both at one time, and Twitter absolutely like destroyed me. When I first got Twitter, like Lord of the Rings was like popular and shit, like in Game of Thrones was getting popular, like in the like 2012, and like I just like threw like Lord Reeves on there because Reeves was always what everyone called me growing up because my name starts with an H for whatever reason. I didn't get to pick it, so everyone just called me Reeves instead of trying to pronounce it because the H is stupid. But I thought it was like maybe like when I started to like gain steam and gain a following, I was like, well, is this like pretentious? Like me, like who follow Lord Reeves? Like, and so I tried to change it, and I changed it to Roto Reeves, and I got absolutely dunked on. Like people were like, that was a great handle. Why would you give it up? Like that was stupid. This is terrible. You're garbage. Why would you ever do this? And so luckily no one squatted on it, and I grabbed it right back, and I said, well, never again. I guess I can't change it. And then the Zach Morris story I've told a few times. It was literally just like, when you think about fantasy football is, because I had gone through a few in the early days. When you think about fantasy football, it's like you always have to have a counterpunch, right? Like we don't have all the answers, but you've got to be able to kind of like go with how the season's going that year. If you have an injury, the league still moves on. Like if you lose, Christian McCaffrey, like you still have to set a lineup and play running backs. You got to find a way to make stuff work for you. And that's how I thought about Zach Morris on the show. Like Zach Morris, like no matter what happened, he was like, well, I'll figure something out. We're going to figure something out to get through this. He just always would be calm. It's like, hey, I got a scheme or something to get through. So that's kind of how I always equated it. It syncs up with fantasy football to me.
That is a great parallel. I've never would have thought of that Zach Morris parallel there. But here's a difficult question for you. Let's get to the meat of this thing here. There's a lot of great stashes in the fantasy world, but who has a better stash, Warren Sharp or my guy Matt Donnelly?
Oh man, it's tough.
And don't worry. Warren will not see this.
I mean, Matt has the stash like the father and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. It's that.
I know you have a 9-year-old daughter now, dude. That reference, that's such a dad reference.
Warren has that throwback like 80s, like a professional bowler, like broom handle. You don't see that. It's not a look that's really rocked often these days anymore. Just the clean solo mustache. Everyone's got like this, right? Everyone's got something now. Especially if you're old, like I don't want to shave, really, right? Like shave,
exactly.
like I just want to shave. You don't have to have a full beard, but yeah. Warren has that classic like PGA, the professional bowler tour like stash. So it's a little cleaner, a little neater, but I think both work for each individual.
You can't get a tie, man. You're good. You're good, but I'm not gonna let you get off with a tie, man.
Well, one guy pays my checks twice a week, so I mean,
winner. We have a winner.
And just like that.
But on a serious note, let's talk about a decision that changed the trajectory of your life. We all know the wife and kids. We all know that one, but give us something else.
I mean, it's tough not to go with like the tokens just because those shape, so many things. But
Right.
I mean, honestly, like when you think of like adulthood, like being able to transition and do this has been the thing. I mean, I would have never thought when I was, going to school or, graduating or even starting in the workforce, like jobs like this would ever exist. Like,
Right.
like you can just talk about fantasy football. Like a bunch of other people would talk about fantasy football with you. And like and it would grow and just boom into the business. This fantasy football, even since I've been here in the industry, has been the smallest it will ever be. It just continues. It's progressively getting larger and larger. And I don't know when that bubble pops, because when you think of even us and the amount of people we think we reach, it's still such just a micro atom on like everyone playing fantasy football in the world. And it's so crazy because we live in our Twitter things and people be like, oh, I'm so sick of hearing about this prospect. And it's like, you realize we live in like an echo chamber to us, but like so many people don't even know what the hell is going on. Like so many people don't even know those conversations are going on.
Right.
So when I had the chance to do this, and I didn't start doing this full time until I was 35 years old. I mean, it was never a realistic thing for me.
We'll talk about that decision. As a 35, you have I'm assuming you have a regular 9 to 5.
Yep.
You're going to your wife like, babe, I'm thinking about doing this fantasy. She's like, what the hell are you doing? So let's give us that story.
Yeah, I was more honestly the more the voice of reason in that. Is like, do I even do this? How long can I do it? And she was like, no, like just she's the one that pushed me to like just go and be happy. So that's how I knew. I was like, all right, well, I chose all right here.
Exactly.
We did all right. But yeah, she pushed me. She said, listen, if you got, even if it's for a year or two, like if you get a chance to do something you really want to do, like why not do it? And that's kind of where we are. I'm still riding the wave. It hasn't popped yet, so we'll hang on to the dream here a little longer.
Man, that's cool. We hear so many. We ask this question a lot, and a lot of guys in this industry have wives that's like that. That's like, go ahead and do your thing. This is some good women out there, man.
Well, I just think about it like as a relationship. You think about like either marriage or marrying your best friend, right? And like if you were to come to me and we're boys our whole life, and you're saying like, hey man, I got a shot to do this, but I don't know. What is almost always going to be brass tacks, the advice you're going to give, man. You got to pursue what you want to do, and I think that's just kind of like hand in hand.
That's beautiful.
I also like how you mentioned the microcosm of what fantasy football is. I mean, I live in my Twitter bubble. That's basically the bubble I live in. That's my glass bowl. I don't venture into Reddit because those waters are really rough. Facebook, I can't get behind on Facebook. I mean, unless you want to be Facebook friends, we could probably work something out there.
Have you guys talked to JJ? Not to cut you off, I'm sorry, but have you talked to JJ Zacharison?
Yeah, we did. Actually, 3 weeks ago.
He goes into Reddit and like replies to people.
I know he's
a
a braver man than I am.
What a demon!
Yeah, that's the muddy waters.
If you want to know what you're doing wrong, you go to Reddit. I mean, they're not afraid to let you know what you're doing wrong. I mean, Twitter's got their trolls, but Reddit, that's a different beast altogether right there. Now, you talked about how it's just such this little small kind of area and everything like that. What are some of the biggest changes that you see now compared to when you first started, not only in the fantasy football industry, but yourself in particular?
I think just in general, the overall knowledge of fantasy football and like what goes into things like in the following season. Like, remember, like I'm thinking like for me, it started like basically the Matt Ryan year, the year Matt Ryan won MVP. Typically in fantasy football, you would just see that player be drafted like really highly the next year. Like I remember playing when Matthew Stafford threw 40 touchdowns in 2011. He was like a first round pick the next year. Now, like so much, like people are so much sharper on like regression analysis, understanding what went into making the season prior and what goes into the sustainability of that season. And just the room is just so much better. Like even common knowledge, like people understand that, even the brass tacks general public, and like that stuff that didn't really exist. And then just the amount of, I use a lot of stats and analytics and stuff, obviously, where I work, but the general just like welcoming of all that in so quickly. Whereas like, I was a fantasy baseball player when I was starting. I used to use that stuff in fantasy baseball, thinking like the doors would never really open for football. And that's when I started to get into tweeting this stuff. When I was still working my regular 9 to 5 is when those doors kind of opened a little bit and it just kind of took off like wildfire. But now like, shit, like my father-in-law knows what ADOT is now and like stuff like that. And it's just like, that stuff like would never existed, not even 10 years ago, but like 4 or 5 years ago. And like, it's just like inundated everybody's common knowledge, and everyone's got like a sharp grasp on what's kind of really going on.
It's funny how you mentioned it because we've talked to some of those trailblazers in our industry previously, snail mail kind of things, the fax machine era. And now, like you said, everything, all the information you could possibly want is at the tip of your fingers 24/7. And there's not really a dumb fantasy football player anywhere. You could literally take someone's top 150, draft best player available, and have yourself a pretty good team in those fantasy leagues moving forward. So I think that everyone's kind of on that same platform. Like you said, trying to find that new edge at ADOT or some of these analytics that you get into. I mean, analytics wasn't really, it was there, but it wasn't really a thing that people were studying 10 years ago when it came to fantasy, 15 years ago when it came to fantasy. And that's another one of those things that's kind of really separated some of the great minds in this industry from, well, myself, let's be honest.
I think that's the beauty of fantasy of football, though. It's continuously humbling. No one knows that really. They have cracked the code. There's no skeleton key, or else we wouldn't really have a game if it was. I mean, granted. I mean, I still think there's an edge like longevity. Like I think, like I would, basically beat my grandma in a league over the course of 10 years. I'd have a lot more wins than her. But the fact is, if we just set a lineup on Sunday, she would have a shot to beat me.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a grind, right? Going through the whole fantasy, the season here, there's a grind and everything that comes with it there. How do you recharge and when do you recharge?
Yeah, that's it right now, kind of through that period. And, granted, I a couple years ago took this job at Sharp Football, and I'm kind of, doing the lifting on my own on the fantasy football side. So I've taken on more work through that process, but it's been rewarding in the same sense. I mean, the most thing I always tell people is, you get to live kind of something, a passion and dream, but remember, it still is a job. Like you're putting work in still. And there's no way that you can get around that and not be successful. You can't be successful in anything if you're not willing to put work in. It doesn't matter what you choose to do. So it's not just a free pass. I don't need to just hang out and they just like shoot shit and talk football all the time. Like I actually have to have actual advice that's good, especially, since it's a subscriber-based, platform. I have to, have a certain hit rate, and people need to understand my process, how we get there, and have information that they're not able to get other places. So yeah, it definitely is. It definitely can be a lot of work, especially for me. I write every single game up in probably what I would believe is the greatest detail in the industry. That's not me just being like crazy. It's just, I see other people write those kind of articles, and I try to step my game up every year. When I see people come up, when Evan's writing the matchups, I try to be better than Evan. When Tags, was doing the primer, I'm trying to make it better than the primer. Anyone that keeps wanting to come up and try to write something, I'm going to see what they're doing, and I'm going to try to one up that. That's the hunger. That's what I want to do. So when you're writing up, now that they added a week for us, you're writing 280 games a year plus playoffs and 3. We get to February. It's nice to take a little break, try to catch up on a little TV, spend more time with the kids, stuff like that, and then once summer, like after 4th of July, it's just like all like speed run into the season again. So we're kind of taking our time, doing what we can, kind of just catching our breath when we can at this time of the year. And hopefully the NFL stops trading, all these stars like they've done this offseason.
It was crazy there for a while, wasn't there? So I tried, this is kind of like you said, the quiet time of the year. But when news breaks, I want to be like everyone else and get that video out. And I was like, I couldn't keep up. I'm like, I got a 9-to-5 job still going on. I'm like, they're not going to let me drop everything I'm doing and crank out a video real quick. And then obviously everything that comes with it. So it has been one of those off seasons that's been absolutely crazy, but it's been,
Devontae Adams got traded at like, I want to say it was like 7:30 or 8 o'clock my time at night. Me and my son, you think about what you're doing at 8 o'clock at night. You're not in like the work mindset. And I'm hanging out with my oldest, and he's like, "Dad, Devontae Adams got traded." I was like, "Well, shit, gotta go cover this." It's like, so you just got it's drop of a hat. So it is kind of, we're at the mercy of a lot of this stuff, the timing wise, because a lot of people don't think about that too. When you work your 9 to 5, like you punch in and out, like you almost never punch out here.
Right. And it's year round now too. But talk to us a little bit about your YouTube playlist. What's on your YouTube playlist, man? If we hacked your computer, what are we finding on there?
Oh man, so I mean, not as any shade you guys think. I almost consume like very little fantasy football content. So I don't listen to really any fantasy football podcasts. I don't really listen to any shows. In season, I'll read stuff because I want to see what other people, the work they're creating. But like off season, like I'm mostly like, watching stuff on, like video games in the lab, trying to I still play Madden religiously online. So I'm trying to do like some lab work there. What other games I'm playing? Lately, I've been like down the rabbit hole of watching a lot of Ink Master videos on YouTube.
I used to be addicted to Ink Master.
I've just been like streamlining the hell out of those, just inject them into me. I don't know. That's just been like kind of my go-to. Like when you're getting to bed, you need to get ready to like just that shutdown mode, but you're not quite ready. I just pop on the Ink Master videos.
That's funny, dude. I was addicted for a while. I was like the number one fan of that show. But what's something about yourself that many people don't realize?
I mean, I would say, that just like I'm not like so much of a football robot, like in general, that I have a lot of other interests in football. It's just kind of one of those things I like to keep fresh on me, not have it way down and be like where it's something that's like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I don't want it to be like that. Like I said, it is still a job, but I still have too many other interests in life, whether it be, pop culture, movies, video games, doing stuff with my kids. I do a lot of tabletop gaming, so want to hang out with my friends. The pandemic obviously made it hard for everybody, but all those things, like I still want to be like real personable and out there and not just be sheltered on my computer in my office.
Man, that makes so much sense.
I'm going to follow up that here in a second, but first, you mentioned the process and results on a subscription-based kind of website. Now, for you, which is more important for you, your actual process or the result?
I mean, it's still got to be a blend of both, and it's got to be the result because people are there for the answers to the test, right? Like no one, your process can only get you so far if it's not yielding any results. Is basically what I'm saying. You can sound like the sharpest guy, in the game, but if you're not leading people to smart decisions and decisions that they're making before other league mates do it, you're just not gonna last. So you still do need the results to go with it. But I still think the transparency of people understanding how you work, how you arrive at those decisions, and you show your work is always going to go a long way. Especially to people that want to learn more. I'm someone like that. Like when I pick something up, and I have like a real addictive personality. So like when I like learn something, I want to like learn everything about it, right? And I feel like, if that's the kind of analyst I want to be, like when you come in and you read one of my articles or you find some content, like I want to show you how to do it so you can potentially go do this on your own. You may not want to. You may be like, screw that. That's like a lot of work. But I want you to at least see the forefront of the transparency of like, this is how I arrive at the decisions that I get to.
So speaking of this transparency now, we know you're a lord, and all lords have land in Europe, right? It's a thing. Now, am I mistaken? But are you not a landowner in Europe? There, don't you have like a little plot of land?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, it's on the level of like buying the naming a star, right? So my wife a couple years ago for Christmas jokingly bought me a square foot of land in Scotland to make me a lord, and I got like the certificate. But like I said, it's more of like a gag gift. It's like land preservation, but it was a cute gag gift, and it was fun. And Twitter had fun with it when I put it out. There was a couple trolls, but it's like, you're missing the point, man. Like it was kind of, she swerved into the name handle. So I do actually have the certificate. It's more for funny, but more for fun.
That should be up behind you, man.
I know. Yeah. I just recently moved, and what that was on, I actually broke the back of the clasp for it. So I do have it like sitting, like leaning against the wall on something.
Nice. Yeah, man. Talk to us about some of your more memorable podcasts or interviews. Like, what's the first thing that pops in your mind?
Well, I mean, when I was first, kind of coming up, and I didn't know like I was going to do this. I still remember, trying to podcast. I was like, oh man, like people like want to listen to us talk about fantasy football, and a bunch of people opened the door for me. Davis Maddock was like one of the first guys to like have me on doing stuff with him. Rumford Johnny, who doesn't really do fantasy football stuff, but they used to do a podcast called The Two Mugs, and they used to get a bunch of people on there, like the late great Chris Wessling used to be on. Obviously, Evan Silva used to go on, and like Rumford Johnny kind of put me into a group that that lined up with all those guys, and they kind of found my work, and it just kind of like caught up like from there. In terms of the podcasting, Denny Carter is actually the guy who got me in as my first job writing in the industry. I used to just get on Twitter when Twitter opened up, and I don't have a Facebook or anything. I actually I'm not a huge social media guy, but my one buddy said, get a Twitter. It's so easy to follow news. And I said, cool. And I saw some of the like stats people were tweeting. I was like, I can tweet out some stuff that's a little better. And there used to be a site called NFL Retweet. It might still be around. I'm not 100% sure if it is or not. But they used to pick up my stats and retweet them. And somehow Denny Carter at the time was following them and saw, he's like, hey, you're putting out a lot of these stats. He's like, would you want to write something for the site? And I was like, dude, I'm not a writer. And he was like, oh, you don't really need to be. And I was like, all right, cool. And so that's kind of how it started. Denny got me in. I started writing articles at that time for XN Sports. I was making $15 an article, writing about whatever the hell I wanted. And like, you know, those two guys, like, I just was real fortunate to get with the right people at the right time. Like a lot of people that find like their jobs and success. I mean, you need help along the way. And I was real fortunate to like run into the people that could put me into the proper audiences and elevate my voice at the time to kind of what I have now.
Yeah. So let's kind of go back to, I mean, you've done interviews and everything with all kinds of people here. Now, when you talk about this, even in this space, this fantasy football space, is there someone that you met or you're about to meet and you had like one kind of impression of them, they totally shocked you with their actual personality? You mentioned that one thing people don't realize about you is you're way more outgoing than maybe you might get credit for elsewhere. Like I know Evan, you mentioned him. He looks kind of that intimidating, unapproachable. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But when you get to know him, he's like a big teddy bear too, right? When it's all said and done. Is there someone that kind of left you like thinking one way, and then when you met them, is like, oh, I was wrong on this guy? Or
not so much from the stance. I mean, like I said, we were joking a little bit before the show too, is I've kind of lived life on like more of the optimist side too. So I'm like one of those people, like, I really don't think negatively about anyone until they like, unless you burn me, then like, then that changes the game. But, you know, kind of go over the mind. I say the one thing with fantasy football, and you can maybe attest to going to me, is everyone's taller than you think they are. Like, I don't know if it's because like you think everyone's sitting down on these shows. Literally every person is taller that you beat. Like fantasy football is like, everyone's like 6 foot, like 6'5". It's like you're like you said, Evan. The first time I met Evan,
not everyone, man, not
like,
everyone.
I was like, what the hell?
Not everyone, dude.
But yeah, but no, personality wise, I think you have to understand why everyone's there, right? Like why would we really have enemies? We're all on common ground. You know, we're all meeting at these events for a reason, right? Like we all are super in phase. Doesn't mean we all have to like each other as people, but there is a common ground. And I think when you get there in like a space like Canton, it's easy just to kind of find that footing, the natural conversation, and the conversations and the meetings up of people like just tend to go well, right? Like I mean, maybe if I was to meet someone like outside of fantasy football and not really have that as an avenue, it would go differently. But when you have that as like kind of that initial launch point of meeting a person for the first time, it's really easy to kind of get the ball rolling in a positive note.
Yeah, that the expo kind of, well, I'll tell you what, I have never been hugged by as many dudes in one weekend as I was at the expo, which I'm not a hugger, so you got to understand that was a little bit something for me now.
That was like peak COVID too. Like I was like, oh man, we got to go out and go home and get tested immediately.
Exactly.
The good thing is the mustache does act as a mask, right? It does filter a lot of the viruses before it enters. So, if you didn't break the fantasy matrix and get that foot in the door there and with Sharp Football and all the other different websites that you kind of worked for to get to where you are today, what would you be doing right now if it wasn't for fantasy?
I mean, I hate to think about it. I mean, I was working a job I really didn't love. You know, I was a product manager at a hydraulic seal company, spending a lot of time in spreadsheets, like, you know, following the flow of product. Wasn't super enjoyable, but, you know, obviously you have a family, you're making things happen. So I would hope that I would have moved on and done something greater at that point, but I don't know. I really don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, I'm just really grateful that I don't have to do that and think about that, to be honest, at least yet. Like I said, that bubble might pop eventually.
Yeah, that does not sound exciting at all. I mean,
no, a lot of numbers, a lot of spreadsheets. That's like I said, it helped me out now. But
I'm about to say, it seemed like it helps you, even like how you can talk about fantasy. It sounds like spreadsheets, like broken down into sections and columns. Like you're very like analytical that way, you know.
I still haven't figured out how to put a formula into an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, that's where I'm at right now.
I mean, it's tough now. My oldest, we were talking about kids. My oldest is 17. He's gonna be a senior next year, and he's kind of at that bridge of like, you have well, what are you thinking about doing? You know, and you know, he doesn't really have an answer yet. And there's nothing wrong with that. but it's just like one of those things. Like now everything's so wide open in the world, right? Like you don't necessarily even have to have a college degree anymore. You don't have to do these things. You can have a trade. You've got all these other avenues for, income now that didn't exist even 5 years ago, 7 years ago. And he's kind of right on that cusp, and we're trying to figure that out as a parent, like what direction to kind of like, you don't want to force his hand, but you want to nudge him into making good decisions while he's young. So we're kind of right there on that plateau with him right now of like, all right, well, what's the next move, coming out of high school?
Maybe good decisions is part of this next answer, but what have you learned through fantasy football? And what has it taught you about yourself?
Like I said, just the humbling aspect. 100%, right? Like you can be the best at this for a number of years, or you can be like really good at this. And like I said, it always is consistently humbling. It's just consistently humbling. Like you're gonna get stuff wrong. You have to be able to operate within failure a lot in this, like doing this, and be comfortable failing, which not everyone is. So I mean that's easy, like top down, like just understanding the humbling aspect of fantasy football.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Relationships are very important. We all know that in any industry. Give us a few people who helped you throughout your career in this fantasy world.
Yeah, like I said, the primary ones at the launching point were Denny Carter, Davis Maddock and Rumford Johnny, and then Evan Silva knocked the big door down for me, getting me hired at NBC at the time, like basically vouching for me when I was making an article that was direct competition with his, saying like, we still need this on our website, was like huge. And so he knocked down like the largest door. So I'm forever grateful to those people. And there's so many people along the way that have helped me out that I've been really fortunate with. And I'm still friends with everybody basically in industry. I'm sure I have some low key, like in the cut enemies that I don't know about, but for the most part, I'm not really looking over my shoulder too much.
Thanks. Yeah. So you sound like a wise man. So give us some advice for those of us trying to make it in the industry, and then also give us your best piece of parenting advice.
Parenting advice. I'm going to need some help on that. Your guys, you just try to make do, right? You just try to learn from the things we did when we were young and the mistakes that we learned and try to guide them away from those. Exactly. But for the most part, we also grew up and we know how it goes as well too. So we're just trying to make sure that they make the most uniform decision they can, right? Like just put them in a position where at least thinking about what they're doing. But that only gets us so far. But other than that, just want to have everybody be healthy, and just have everybody safe. But in the industry, it's wide open for you, especially right now. A lot of people think it's like there's a saturation here, and I guess granted there is, but like I said, fantasy football still is as small as it's ever been. It's continuing to grow. The biggest thing is just find the avenue, do the work that you want to do. That's the biggest thing, the work you want to be doing. Because that's the work that will shine through the most when you get there and get noticed. You can cut your teeth a little bit, but if I hire you to do like waiver wire articles and that's not really what you want to do, like eventually you're gonna be like, this isn't what I want to do. So make sure you're at least finding an avenue to do the work you want to do. I always tell people from like a creation standpoint, like literally just start by asking a question and then just go answer it. Don't come in with any perceived notions like, hey, do senior wide receivers like perform better in the NFL? Go start with there and then go answer it. See where it happens, then put it out. People always are looking for stuff like that. So I said the easiest way to do it is just like I said, ask yourself a question, go get the information, answer it, and like I said, just do the work you really want to do.
I kind of go with that whole motion there too, like 40-year-old virgin style. I usually answer a question with the question. we all know that scene. That's basically how my analysis basically goes. And that's what the mustache is there, trying to distract people from what the next question might actually be from me.
I don't know if you guys were around when Fantasy Douche was around, for Frank DuPont, but when I worked at RotoViz under him, he was one of the greatest, masters of teaching me growing up, like coming up in the industry of like, if you write an article too, like think about fantasy football from where you're wrong. This is how I play fantasy football too. We kind of hit it on a little earlier from the humbling aspect is I play fantasy football like I'm wrong. How can I insulate myself from being wrong? And when you write your articles and create content, think about that as well too, because I guarantee you, someone that's going to come and pick your part of work has thought about where you're wrong.
Right.
So I mean, definitely think about the angle too. When you're coming in, you're like, oh, I've got this great nugget that I want to drop, or this great, top-down wisdom, and think about it, it's like, all right, well, where is this wrong? Where doesn't this work? Because again, there's no skeleton key here. So you have to think about that. And if you start incorporating that stuff into your work, that transparency then becomes more, evident to people, and they're able to see that work, and they're able to see all the information put together, and they're able to make their own decisions based on like, oh, here are the pros of this, and here are the cons of this. And now I can apply this to things I want to do. I can make my own decision based on that, instead of just saying, oh, hell, I'll grab this player that so-and-so told me to grab. You're too low on this player. Like,
It's like not quite the same, but my old man, he used to say, if you want to find the easy way to do something, ask someone lazy to do it. And they'll find the easiest path of least resistance, right?
That's true.
I mean, that's what you said. You said you find your weakest point and you work back from there. Now, with that all being said, hey, we got a little bit of promo stuff here to talk here real quick. So, as always, the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast is presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. Head over to fantasypoints.com, enter promo code Vipers22 and get 10% off that subscription today. And they just dropped their prospect guide here for 2022. Greg Cosell, NFL Films, 200 plus rookie profiles. I mean, you got strengths, weaknesses, NFL transitions, Devy rankings, rookie rankings, one-stop shop for all your prospect needs. Now, Rich, I know you guys are doing some things there at sharpfootball.com. What do you guys got coming here in the next little while?
Well, right now we're inundated with draft coverage, and we have 2 of the top 5 mock drafters of the past 5 years that do all of that stuff on our site. Ryan McChrystal and Brendan Donahue. I have like all my dynasty content, up from this offseason. I've been writing up all these moves that we talked about that have been going on. Every superstar that get traded. It's nice they gave us at least a 2-week kind of hiatus here from a Pro Bowler not getting traded. But all that stuff is open on the website. We don't paywall anything, this time of year and throughout over the summer, not until late in the summer when we start doing like seasonal stuff. So you can check out basically anything you want at Sharp Football Analysis. All the stats, like from Warren's old page, are all transferred over to the new site. All that stuff is just out there, open. You can find a lot of information over there.
Are we going to be able to catch you at the beach house there, that NBC Edge beach house there, watching Danny try and catch Frisbees? Are you going to be part of that this year?
There's been whispers of what people, want to do. I don't know if I'm going to make the group. They're giving me grief because I've kind of mentioned that both me and my wife turned 40 and we're a month apart our birthdays. And we want to kind of do like just like our own like 40th like solo me and her vacation. And they're like, no, you got to come. We're going to do this thing every year. And it's like, so we'll see what shakes out. But, I will say I was the one that recorded the Frisbee throw. And Pete, what a throw. That was a one-take throw. And to have Denny just squander the opportunity to secure that grab because that was a one-take throw. And it was absolutely like Dan Marino to Mark Clayton on a line. And just blew it, man. Just didn't come with the grab.
I mean, I've never seen a Frisbee throw on point like that. That was impressive. And I thought it was like watching like those.
How far was that? That was like.
I mean, it was deep. We were we were on like a cliff, a house, a cliff that goes down, and it had to be a couple hundred yards for sure.
That's crazy.
And it was one take. It was just a perfect one take throw. It was absolute perfection to the finish.
Denny.
Get one of those.
And with that all being said, hey, Rich, we're glad you were able to join us and jump on here and talk shop with us a little bit. For Major, for myself, for Rich, hey, make sure you catch him on the Twitter machine there at Lord Reeves, sharpfootball.com. And there's some other outlets there that you put some articles out from time to time as well. And hey, we will see you next week because we got all kinds of stuff coming down. When news breaks, when signings happen, we got you covered. And if you head to the Vipers Network right now, there is a prospect profile series going down right now in which I spent about 7 minutes talking about each prospect. And it's one prospect per day right up until the draft. So maybe catch that if you have nothing better to do with your time, especially your lunch break. So anyway, enough of me. Let's move on to next week's show. See you then.